Shabbat Torah, as I returned from Israel just about 24 hours ago, I'm very happy to call forward David Rubin to offer our Devar Torah this morning for our Legacy Shabbat.
Shabbat Shalom. Following Robert Alter, I'd like to talk about some literary structure in Parsha Shemot. How are we now? Okay, let me start again. So following Robert Alter, I'd like to talk about some literary structure in Parshat Shemot. This is an aspect of Tanakh that frequently has gone unremarked and even unnoticed, and often completely lost in translation into English. But looking at it can enrich our appreciation of our sacred texts. Alter first addressed this subject in 1980 in his Art of Biblical Narrative, before he began his magnificent and monumental translation of the entire Hebrew Bible. Having completed that translation in 2018, he had more to say about its literary and linguistic challenges in the Art of Bible Translation, published last year, 2019. So as the rabbi pointed out earlier, chapter 1 begins with a recap of the names of Jacob's sons who came to Egypt with him, in verses 1 to 5, and more about this later. We are told that they all died, but that the Israelites multiplied greatly. The main narrative then tells of the new king, Asher lo yada et Yosef, who did not know Joseph. The sense of yada in verse 8 is more remember or appreciate. There's a nice note in Eitz Chaim by Nachum Sarna talking about the significance of yada throughout the book of Exodus, and I commend that note to your attention. It's a note to verse 8. So the sense here, again, is more remember or appreciate. In verses 15 to 16, Pharaoh orders the midwives to kill the newborn Hebrew boys. When, fearing God, they fail to do so, we're told in verses 20 and 21 that God deals well with them, recalling his promise to Abraham in Genesis chapter 12, verse 3, quote, I will bless those who bless you, and those who curse you will I curse. Note the structure there. That's what's called a chiasm. We have I will bless, subject, those who bless you, object, and will curse, and those who curse you will I curse. So then object and subject. So we get this X structure, or chiasm. And the chiasm, in fact, is in the original Hebrew. That blessing / curse is repeated in Numbers 24:9, which is the end of Bilam's first curse of the people, the part that has entered our liturgy as Ma Tovu. We should view this repetition of that theme, blessings and curse of those who bless and curse, as something that's intentional on the part of the authors, or if you will, the redactors of the Tanakh. It's not coincidental. So Pharaoh then orders all his people, presumably all officials, if not literally all the Egyptian people, to throw all the newborn Hebrew boys into the Nile so that they will die there by drowning in the waters of the Nile. This winds up being multiply ironic. Moses winds up being saved from a basket in the reeds in the waters along the shore of the Nile. The first plague turns the Nile, which is the source of life to Egypt, into blood, symbolic now not of life, but of death. And ultimately, it is the waters of the Yam Suf, the Reed Sea, that destroy Pharaoh's army. Continuing on, chapter 2 relates the birth of Moses, his rescue by Pharaoh's daughter, no less, more irony, his being reared by his own mother, what could be more ironic than that, being taken to the palace and named, killing an Egyptian overseer, and fleeing from Egypt to Midian, when he realizes that Pharaoh knows about that incident. At a well in Midian, he meets and defends Ruel, Jethro's daughters, of whom Zipporah becomes his wife and the mother of his firstborn son, Gershom. Alter points out to us that this scene is an example of a standard biblical type scene. Think back on Genesis chapter 24 with Eliezer and Rebekah at the well. Think back to Genesis 29 with Jacob and Rachel at the well. The scene goes as the groom-to-be or a surrogate journeys to a foreign land. He encounters a girl or girls at a well, come to water her or their flocks. Water is drawn, and the animals are watered. The girls rush home to talk about the stranger. The stranger is invited home to a meal, and a betrothal is announced. Chapter 2 ends with verses 23 to 25, wherein Pharaoh dies, and the Israelites, groaning under their bondage, cry out to God, who heard them, who remembered the covenant with Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, who looked upon the Israelites and took notice of them. The last of those four verbs in the Hebrew is vayeda, yet another form of the verb root yod daled ayin, which we encountered at the beginning in the Pharaoh who did not know Joseph. So we move from the Pharaoh who did not know Joseph to a point we are told, and God knew. The entire story, then, is an example of a literary structure or a rhetorical structure known as an inclusio or an envelope. The whole story is bracketed, enveloped between the two uses of the verb yod daled ayin. For what it's worth, took notice is the new JPS translation, and that completely loses or hides the inclusio. Alter, the literary scholar, being sensitive to that, translates the verb as knew and lets the reader figure out which of the umbers that go around the word knew should be applied in this particular case, but he maintains the structure. So in just these two chapters, we've seen several literary devices, key promises used multiple times elsewhere in Tanakh, extensive uses of irony, lengthy type scene stories, and devices such as inclusio. The Parsha continues with Moses' commission at the burning bush, his repeated questioning his fitness for the task, God's repeated reassurance and specific instructions, the bizarre circumcision episode at a night encampment, Moses meeting Aaron and telling him of the mission, their first abortive meeting with Pharaoh leading to further harshening of the Israelites' burden, and the Israelites' reproach of Moses and Aaron, Moses' rebuke of God, God's reassurance. Those are topics for many other drashot. The Parsha began, Ve'ela Shemot B'nai Yisrael Haba'im Mitzrayma, and these are the names of the sons of Israel who came to Egypt. The exact 6 words used toward the end of Genesis, chapter 46, verse 8a, which there is also followed by a listing of the names of Jacob's son. Okay, and then we get the listings recapitulating that, although the order in Genesis 35:23 is the order that's used in Exodus rather than the one at the end of Genesis. What are all those listings of names about? They reflect the continuity of the Israelite community. And today at Bethel, we are honoring by name our members who have confirmed pledges made to our Life and Legacy campaign, helping us to maintain the continuity of our own community. Shabbat Shalom.
So Yashikoah to David, and thanks for his many years of leadership.